Everyone, welcome to Brown Girls Happy Hour, where two brown girls make cocktails or mocktails, and we also get guests on our show to discuss their books, their inspiration, their journey with us. Today we have with us Aparna. She moved to, okay, she's actually joined. Let me just get her. Yeah, she moved to the US when she was 2 years old, and we're going to talk to her about her debut, A Boy with Fire. So I'm going to have Daman and Aparna join us. Hi, Aparna.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Kathy. Hi, Aparna.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am, yeah, we are great too. How are you, Daman?
I'm good. Excited for our happy hour.
Yeah.
Happy
So,
Saturday happy hour.
yeah. Should we first make the mocktail and then we can get into the discussion and the introduction?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Let's do it.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Um,
So, as Kathy mentioned, we are making a mocktail today, but we can also make a cocktail version of it very easily. So, we'll start with a glass with some ice in it, and then we need some lime juice, and we need some simple syrup. And then, if you want to make a cocktail, you can add gin or vodka to it. We are skipping that today. We are just making a mocktail.
It's always gin o'clock somewhere. So if you want to add some gin, you definitely can.
And then the last step is just top off with soda.
yeah, I didn't have
That's
soda with me, so I'm just going to top up with water.
hmm.
There we go. Whoop! Oh my god. I think I just dropped my camera. Okay. There we go. I added a little bit of a straw.
Oh, nice. That's fancy.
It's like one of those plastic straws. I wish I had one of those fun, like, fancy straws, but
All right. Cheers, ladies.
cheers.
Cheers.
It's nice.
That's good.
Mm.
So, Aparna, you dedicated this to Nicki Minaj. Tell us why.
Yeah, so for a little bit of context for people who don't know, before the live, ladies asked, are you dedicating this drink to? And I said Nicki Minaj. One, because I think she's an amazing girl boss. But I think outside of just her artistry and her creativity, she's very much an entrepreneur. And that very much inspires me. I think outside of like being an author, I like to think of myself an entrepreneur and pursuing some of my small business interests and creating almost like a company around these books that I'm doing. So she's a huge inspiration of using your own creativity for your business.
Yeah,
Yes,
tell
we
us
agree
more
with
about,
that.
Sorry, say
right.
that again.
I agree with that. It's like very important to be more resourceful than just being creative, especially in today's world. So,
Yes.
kudos to that.
Thank you.
So so tell us about, like, can you give us a little bit of your introduction? We know that you moved to the US when you were 2 years old. You did your um, honors in Stanford. I might be wrong. Please, yeah.
Yeah. So I immigrated from India when I was 2 years old, and I've been living in the United States ever since. So I'm very proudly an Indian American um, immigrant, and I studied English at Stanford, graduated with honors just like over a year ago, and I'm now have my first book coming out in was it 17 days? So it's insane.
Oh,
It's
wow.
end of August 31st, and here he is, absolutely beautiful. Um, and my
Amazing.
copy's kind of beat up, as you can see. This is like my one proof copy that I have. But I love him so much, and I've been using him and all the photos and TikToks that I've been making to promote the book.
So what is the book about? A Boy with Fire.
Yeah, so The Boy with Fire plays homage to my roots for sure. I was born in Rajasthan, so it's a desert, South Asian inspired fantasy, very much inspired by Hindu mythology, the Rajputs. and it's about an ex-assassin named Yasin Knight, an heir named Elena Ravens, and her father, the tyrant, Leo Ravens, who struggle for power when an ancient prophecy threatens to destroy their world. So it's the first of a trilogy, and it comes out August 31st.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's an amazing journey. How did
Yeah,
you get to-
congratulations. And it sounds so interesting, right? At least to me, like all the touch of Rajasthani culture, Rajputs and everything. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
how did you do your research? Did you like go to Rajasthan and then like
Yeah,
what did you
I haven't been back to India in like 6 years. One because of college and now the pandemic. We were supposed to go. We're hoping to go in November. We'll see. Fingers crossed. But I largely did draw, like, from my experiences visiting India and spending time in the Rajasthani desert, but also a lot of research into Hindu mythology. Most importantly, Kali Ma and Ma Durga, like their origin stories, how they came to be, and some of the adventures that they came upon. One of my favorite research stories was the origin story of Kali Ma, and she has several. Like there's this one in which I think it was the battle against Mahishara, who was the water buffalo demon, and the gods weren't winning. So they came together and they're like, okay, what do we do? And they decided to give a part of themselves to create a new deity, but they didn't create a warrior or a god. They created a goddess, and her name was Kali, and she descended into the battlefield with her Chandikas, which were her amazing female warriors, and she slew the Mahishara, the water buffalo demon, and she drank his blood so he didn't regenerate and come in the next life. I thought that was badass. I thought that was amazing. But most importantly, I think the lesson or some of the themes that I really connected with was one, like divine female anger. I think in literature today, we don't often see the depiction of female anger, and when we do, it usually leads to madness. I think of like Dany Targaryen in the Game of Thrones, right? When she goes berserk at the very end, you're like, what happened? Like it's always like the powerful women always go mad. And I wanted to stay away from that. Like I wanted to write powerful female characters who come into power through strife and through struggle, and use a little bit of that strife and struggle to understand their roots and know that their power comes with a cost. So when Kali Ma, when she would defeat them, the demons, she almost like she was having so much power. It wasn't until Shiva laid down at her feet for her to realize, I need to stop. So I think there's always an understanding of limitations and sacrifice. So I really wanted to bring that into The Boy with Fire.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. I'm so excited to read your book when it comes out.
Thank you. Yes, I hope you guys can pick up a copy.
Yeah,
And I'm
definitely.
also kind of remembering one of the first few cocktails, Kathy, which was dedicated to Goddess Kali, right? And we were
Yeah.
also so amazed because we read about her before we made that drink, and we were like on the same page that she's so badass, like the best goddess ever.
Yeah, right.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. So how did you get into writing? Like, how has your journey been? Did you always wanted to become a writer? Like, always wanted to publish your own book?
Yeah, I knew since I was like 4 years old that I always wanted to be a writer, but I don't think I understood what it meant. I was like, oh, I'll just write stories. Like, oh, I'll be fine. Like, oh, somehow I'll get published. I didn't understand the real world applications of that. I didn't really get serious about writing until college when I, studied it. Like I studied literature, I studied creative writing, the art of telling a story, and perfecting my craft. But I think it was mostly during the pandemic of 2020 when we all were home and we all had lots of time on our hands. A little part of me was saying that, this is a time to write this book. And The Boy with Fire had been in my mind for 10 plus years. Like I had written a story of it before. I never looked at that manuscript ever again. It's sitting in a box underneath my bed somewhere, not looking at that. It was a terrible, shitty first draft, but it led to some of the mythology and the world creation that you see in this version of the book. So during the pandemic of 2020, I think seeing the rise of nationalism, seeing the rise of echo chambers in America, in India, around the world, I think really compelled me and kind of gave me like almost like the fire underneath my butt to like write this book, because this book talks about it. It talks about the dangerous concoction of when religion mixes with nationalism. What happens when the people in power tell you what to believe, how to believe, and how to enact your faith, you know, and what happens when these people manipulate your faith. I think it also goes into more so an idea of redemption and forgiveness. I think in religion today, you know, there's in every religion around the world, in every mythology, there's a story about forgiveness, about second chances. And I don't think it's a trope that we see often in books, because I think in our world, we're always talking about cancel culture. We're always talking about, you know, if you make one mistake, you're done. I wanted to write a story where there are second chances, where there's a almost redemption story in which we see someone fall from grace and then claw their way back, even if it's ugly and it's, you know, their morals are kind of morally gray and you don't really know what side they're on. At least they're making that attempt to go back into grace because they understand just how far they fell.
I love
Wow.
that because I feel like even religious texts are misinterpreted. So mostly what you hear is like either something is a sin or you're a good person, and there is like no in between. There is no coming
Yeah.
back from something bad you did. So I'm very intrigued by this for sure, because this is something we talk about a lot on our podcast as well, where we get into discussions about how religion and politics plays such a role in how the world is.
Yeah.
So I think you have covered a lot of important topics in there.
Yeah, I love, if I wasn't an English major, I knew I would have become a poli-sci major. Like I love politics. I love reading about politics. I love like well, it makes me really sad about the world. And like it makes me like want to curl up in a ball because like where is our world going to go today? But I think understanding the history of political intrigue, some of the ways nations came into power, how they manipulate that power, how they use their power to keep others like underneath their foot. Even today, when we look at neo-colonialism, imperialism, we see that happening with like America, especially with countries in the Middle East, in the Philippines, in India. So had to write that.
Yeah,
And
that sounds really amazing. Yes,
and
Aman,
I
go
have
ahead,
a
sorry.
writer question for you. So,
Mm-hmm.
what's your writing style like? Are you very methodical? Do you have a routine that you follow, or do you follow inspiration?
Yeah, for me, I like to call myself a plotter. So there's like two worlds, like the pantser and the plotter. The pantser is someone who just writes by the seat of their pants. They don't really have a plan. Like they just write like as soon as inspiration hits them. And I think that's a very dangerous way of writing because you never know when inspiration is going to hit. Like you need to have that routine. And I always believe that writing is a muscle. The more you exercise it, the better you're going to get. So I try to write every day if I can. And if I don't write, I'm always thinking about a story or thinking about the next chapter. It's always like cooking in my brain. So for me, when I start to write, I always do a little bit of like method writing. So I always like to be very physical. Before I sit down, I'm always like pacing my room or thinking about a certain scene in my head. And I'm a person, once I have a really good line, then I'll sit down and write. So if I'm running a dialogue scene, if I find a dialogue tag or a line that like it really gets my imagination going, and I think, okay, this would be great for the scene, then I'll sit down at my desk. Like, and this comes after like a few minutes of pacing. I'll sit down at my desk and really like hash it out. But when it comes to battle scenes, and that's something like, The Boy with Fire has plentiful of fight scenes and battle scenes. During the pandemic, I actually started taking boxing classes, and I realized just how amazing that is in understanding fights. The most because like when you're boxing, you kind of have to understand your own strategy and your opponent's strategy, but you also have to understand the physicality of your body. You're very aware of the limitations of like you know, the tiredness in your bones, in your muscles. And I like to have that, so when I'm writing my characters, I'm very realistic about some of the fighting. It's not like a Bollywood movie where you're punching a guy and he goes like 5 feet in the air, right? Like that's not gonna happen. I think I try to be very realistic when I write my characters because they are very much human and they have faults and flaws, because if they didn't, like, why would you want to read about a perfect person?
I love that.
I,
Now I
yeah,
understand why you said you're like a method writer.
yeah, that's very interesting. So we know that your book is coming out pretty soon, but what are you working on next? Like, is there a book or a story that you have in mind that you want to write next? Like, what's
Book
your next
two.
one?
Because it's a trilogy, so I'm working on book two
Right.
of The Boy with Fire. So that hopefully is coming out in 2023. And it's just extending the story. I think book two, if you love book one, book two is even better, I think. More so because the world expands. You're not just in the kingdom of ravens, which was mostly based off of India and Rajasthan. Now you're in other nations, and understanding some of that political intrigue, some of the international, this is my international relations like study is coming in. It's like how nations manipulate each other, how they sign treaties and participate in wars. So that the book two, I think, is a bit more expansive and a lot darker than book one.
Wow. So it's like fiction mixed with like a lot of nonfiction, like a lot of real world
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think one of my biggest inspirations when writing is the news. I remember when I was young, I remember reading two of my favorite authors, so Susan Collins, who wrote The Hunger Games, and then Anthony Horowitz, who wrote the Alex Rider series, because I was a tomboy growing up. I love reading about spy boys. Um, Said they both like Susan Collins got her inspiration for The Hunger Games by watching the Iraqi War, like footage of the Iraqi War. And Anthony Horowitz said like his biggest inspiration was the news. And I remember as a kid, like, oh, why is the news? The news is so boring. Like, there's nothing that happens. And as I grew older, and I was a journalist for the past 5 years, and like studying more so about reporting the news, how the news comes to be. There's so much storytelling that happens, and there's so much like real lifetime impact that I think a lot of authors draw from when writing their own stories, especially if it's about politics, war, or history.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and in fact, like I think everywhere in the world, the news is so unreal right now. Like,
Yeah.
even like the good part and the bad part, like both are unreal. It's like what is happening? Like there's no like stable mental emotion that goes on inside you when you're reading the
No.
news.
No. I
Yeah.
remember when the pandemic first happened, like in March, like in the US, where it was things like March 13th, and those 2 weeks before it was like full lockdown, I just remember every day was an emotional roller coaster, just watching the news. When we didn't understand how big this was going to be, like I remember thinking to myself, oh, I'll be done in 2 weeks. Like I can't believe I thought that, right? Like, but now it's like, wow, I can't believe we went
Right.
through that. We experienced it.
Yeah, it's not over yet as well,
Still
I
not
think.
over. It's still
Yeah.
going. It's almost more. It's been more than a year now.
Right. I know.
Well,
It's
speaking
crazy.
of pandemic, let's switch gears to something slightly lighter. So, Aparna, is there something that, aside from writing your book, that you learned during this time?
During the pandemic, ooh, one that I spend way too much time on my phone now. it's just like I'm afraid to look at my screen time because I just know it's gonna be bad and I'm gonna feel really bad about it. But two, I realized just how much like you underestimate like waking up early and having a cup of tea when like no one else is awake. I don't do that every single day. Like I usually like wake up like later or someone else is already awake. But I just remember on the mornings when you kind of have that early morning start, and you're just in the kitchen, make yourself a nice cup of tea or chai, and you're just all by yourself.
Oh, I think we lost your audio.
Can
Can't
you
you?
hear me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Did I cut off at the end of it, or did you hear that?
Just like at the end when you were talking about like how you underestimate the feeling that you get when you wake up early.
Yeah, when you
Then
wake up early and you have like the whole house is like quiet and you just go into the kitchen and make yourself a nice cup of tea like that. That's a certain kind of peace that you underestimate. Like it's so small, but I think during the pandemic, I realized just how amazing that is, to
yeah.
have that moment for yourself.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, like I'm a different person on the days when I wake up early because I'm so productive and so happy for some
Yeah.
reason. I don't know why. But yeah. So what are you reading right now?
What am I reading? I just finished An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. It's a YA fantasy series, which I loved. I'm also reading. I'm forgetting the name of the book. Um, I think it was like Female Mumbai Gangsters or Female Gangsters in Mumbai. It's a nonfiction book. Um, I'll send the link like after this, but uh, there is a movie coming up by Sanjay Lee Bansali with Alia Butt, and it's called Gangubai, and it's actually based on a real life female gangster um, in Mumbai, and she was like kind of like a prostitute like ringleader, um, sold into prostitution, and how her life. It's a story about her life, and when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is very out of left field for Bollywood, one thing, and so I had to read the book, and it's a collection of the stories of amazing, like badass female gangsters in Mumbai. And when do you ever get to read about female gangsters in Mumbai? Like, first of all, female Indian gangsters, like I've never seen narratives about them. So that
Yeah,
might
it's
be
all
inspiration
about
for
the
a new book.
bhais of Mumbai, right?
Yeah,
We all hear just the bhais.
yeah, exactly. So it's interesting to see and read about how these women also took their stake in like the underworld in Mumbai.
Yeah, I heard about the first female Indian gangster when I was very little. Like, I think I was 10 years old. I heard about Poolan Devi, and I was so impressed. I was like, I want to meet her. And my dad was
Yeah,
like, Are
I
you
know,
crazy?
I remember that too.
Yeah.
yeah. Like I think like of course like gangsters and like they're not great people. Like they're not morally great, you know. They're criminals. But I think just as humans as a society we always have a fascination for like the other, right? The people who bend the constructs that we have, which is the law. I think when we see people break the law, there's like a certain sort of fear, but also a fascination because they had the courage to do something that we did not have, or they just didn't have some of the moral goodness that we had to steal or to make like underground criminal rings. Like that's why we love gangster movies and like gangster novels. So I think reading about Indian female gangsters was a trip, and I'm not finished the book yet, but I'm really excited to learn more about them.
Thank you for, letting us know about this book. Maybe we'll pick it up as well. It sounds really
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
look it
I'll
up after
definitely
this.
I'll send a link. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
And
So
Aparna,
Aparna,
before we end our chat today, is there something that you wanna say to our listeners or viewers?
Um, it's a great question. I think almost to end off our chat, one is that when I wrote The Boy with Fire, growing up, I never really saw myself in the pages of the books I read. You know, being in America, a lot of the books were Western focused or had white boys or white girls, you know, as the main characters. So when I wrote The Boy with Fire, other than like Hindu mythology and my roots, one of my biggest reasons for writing it was so that someone who is 16 or older like can pick up the book and find themselves in my book. So some of the biggest like moments or achievements I have as an author is when I see people DM me or tell me like this is the first book where I actually see myself represented. Thank you for writing this story. Thank you for showing someone who looks like me, who acts like me, and celebrating our culture. I think it's time that Western readers see more about Indian mythology. I think we have a very rich, ripe culture, especially a lot of history, and it deserves to be told and celebrated.
yeah, that's a really great message. Thank you for saying that.
And thank you for
Definitely.
writing it. Some days I actually feel jealous of the readers of next generation because they get to see themselves represented, which we didn't.
Exactly.
So thank you for doing that for them.
Yeah, it's like kind of pushing like the bill forward just a little so that, you know, they don't have to suffer as you kind of did.
Definitely. And thank you for being here today with us. We had so much fun chatting with you. And all the best for your book. We're definitely going to pick it up. And all the
Thank
best for
you.
your next book in the trilogy. And yeah, and let us know how we can, like maybe we can connect later as well, like next year. No, in 2023 when your next book comes out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, when we do our next marketing circuit, well, then we could have another chat.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you,
Thank
Aparna.
you, Aparna,
Awesome.
for teaching us
Thanks,
about method
ladies.
writing and joining us.
Yes, of course, of
And
course.
best of luck with your book. We hope it
Thank you.
does really well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers to that. Thank you, ladies.